The first time Zara Owens saw Draven Silvaris, she was bleeding, not just a little. Her hand had caught on the edge of the iron gate outside her family's estate, and the gash ran deep across her palm, crimson pooling and dripping onto the white marble steps. She'd been trying to run, trying to escape the nightmare her life had become in the span of a single afternoon. Her parents had just told her the news she was to marry Lysander Silvaris, heir to the most powerful vampire dynasty in North America, within the month. Not Gabriel Iverson, the human boy she'd loved since childhood. Not the future she'd dreamed of, planned for, whispered about in the dark. She'd fled the drawing room where her parents sat with the Silvaris family representatives, fled down the hallway and out the front door. And now she stood there trembling, watching her own blood drip steadily onto stone, and she couldn't even bring herself to care about the pain. "You're making quite a mess." The voice came from behind her, low and smooth as silk over steel. Zara spun, startled, and found herself face to face with someone who absolutely could not be human. He stood at the bottom of the steps, perfectly still in a way that no living person ever managed, his skin so pale it seemed to glow faintly in the dusk. His hair fell past his shoulders, white as winter frost, and his eyes God. His eyes were the color of dark wine, ancient and knowing, and fixed on her bleeding hand with an intensity that made her heart stutter. I'm sorry. I didn't realize anyone was out here," she stammered, instinctively pressing her good hand over the wound, though blood still seeped through her fingers. Clearly. He moved then, flowing up the steps with inhuman grace, and suddenly he was close enough that she could see the aristocratic angles of his face, the way his features seemed carved from marble, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. "You are the Owens girl, Zara." It wasn't a question. She nodded anyway, taking a half step back. "And you're Draven Silvaris, Lysander's uncle, though the family trees get complicated when you live as long as we do." His gaze hadn't left her hand. "You should bind that. Blood calls to us, especially blood spilled in emotional distress. The scent of it is quite distracting." Horror washed through her. She'd heard the stories about vampires, of course everyone had, ever since the great revealing 15 years ago when vampire society finally made itself known to the human world. But knowing about something intellectually and standing inches away from an actual vampire were very different things. "I'll go inside." "I'm sorry." "Don't apologize." His hand shot out faster than sight and caught her wrist before she could retreat. His skin was cool against hers, his grip gentle but absolutely immovable. "I said it was distracting, not unwelcome. Let me see." Zara's breath caught. She should pull away, should scream, should do anything except stand here letting a vampire, a strange vampire, not even the one she was being forced to marry, hold her arm and examine her bleeding palm with those dark, hungry eyes. But something in his voice held her frozen. Command, yes, but also something else. Curiosity, perhaps, or concern. Draven turned her hand over carefully, studying the gash with a small frown. "Deep. You caught it on iron?" At her nod, his frown deepened. "That will take longer to heal than it should. Come, I have something in my car that will help. I can just go inside, and your parents are currently negotiating the final terms of your marriage contract with my nephew." His voice was flat, matter of fact. "Do you truly wish to return to that room right now, looking like this?" "No, God, no." The thought of facing her mother's disapproving stare, her father's exhausted resignation, Lysander's cold assessment, it made her want to run again. Keep running until she hit the ocean. "I don't want to go back at all," she whispered. "I don't want any of this." For a long moment, Draven was silent. Then, "No, I imagine you don't. But that hardly matters, does it? Your family made their choice when they defaulted on their debts to House Silvaris. Marriage is the price of their survival." He released her wrist and gestured toward the long black car parked at the curb. "Come, I won't bite, I give you my word." The joke, if it was one, fell flat. But Zara followed anyway, because the alternative was standing here bleeding or going back inside to that horrible drawing room, and at least this way she was doing something, moving. Not just accepting her fate like a good little sacrifice. The car's interior was pure luxury, all black leather and subtle mood lighting. Draven opened the passenger door for her with old-world courtesy, then moved around to the driver's side and retrieved a small black case from the console. When he slid into the seat beside her and opened it, Zara saw neat rows of medical supplies, bandages, antiseptic, even a curved needle and surgical thread. "You carry a first aid kit?" she asked, surprised. "I carry many things." He selected a packet of antiseptic wipes and held out his hand, palm up, an invitation. "The world is full of fragile creatures who damage themselves. Give me your hand, Zara." She did, watching as he cleaned the wound with efficient, careful movements. His fingers were cool and steady, and he worked with the precision of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. "How old are you?" she found herself asking. Rude question. But there was a hint of amusement in his voice. "Old enough to remember when this continent was called something different. Old enough to have seen empires rise and fall. Young enough to still find the modern world fascinating." He finished cleaning the wound and reached for a small tube of something that looked like ointment. This will sting. It did, sharp and bright, but Zara bit her lip and didn't pull away. Why are you helping me? Because you're bleeding on my family's property, and that creates certain obligations. He began wrapping her palm in clean white gauze, his touch impersonal as a doctor's. Because you looked like you needed someone to be kind to you. Because I am not my nephew, and I don't enjoy watching young women cry. I'm not crying, not yet. He tied off the bandage and sat back studying her face. But you were before you ran. And you will again, I think, before this is all over. Lysander is not known for his warmth. Bitterness rose in Zara's throat like bile. Then why are you letting him marry me? If you know what he's like, letting him? Draven's laugh was short and sharp. I don't let Lysander do anything. He is the heir, the future of House Silvaris. I am merely the king's younger brother, useful in my way but not the one who makes such decisions. His eyes met hers, and for a moment she saw something that might have been regret in those wine-dark depths. Your family needed money. My family required an alliance with the human elite. Marriage is how such things are done. It's very old-fashioned, but then we are very old. Gabriel, Zara whispered, the name escaping before she could stop it. I was supposed to marry Gabriel. We've been planning it since we were 16. His family is good, respectable. They were going to help my parents with the business troubles. We had it all worked out, and then your parents' debts came due, and Gabriel Iverson's family couldn't cover the amount owed. Draven's voice was gentle, which somehow made it worse. I'm sorry, Zara, truly, but your parents chose survival over love. Most do in the end. The tears came then, hot and furious, and she pressed her bandaged hand to her face, trying to hold them back. She'd been so careful not to cry in front of her parents, not to give them the satisfaction of seeing how thoroughly they'd broken her heart. But here, in the dark privacy of this car with a vampire who was being kinder to her than anyone in her own family. I hate them, she sobbed. I hate all of this. I don't want to marry someone I don't love. I don't want to be tied to your world. To creatures who drink blood and live forever and see humans as what? Food, servants, bargaining chips, all of the above, depending on the vampire. Draven didn't try to touch her, didn't offer empty comfort. He simply sat there, a silent presence in the dark, while she cried herself out. When her sobs finally subsided into hiccuping breaths, he handed her a handkerchief, actual cloth, pristine white with silver embroidery at the corner. Better no. But she took the handkerchief and wiped her eyes. Thank you, though, for the bandage, and for just letting me feel what you're feeling. It's called basic decency, Zara. You shouldn't have to thank me for it. He started the car's engine, and the quiet purr of it filled the silence between them. I'm going to drive you around the block a few times. Give you time to compose yourself before you go back inside. Unless you'd rather I take you somewhere else? The offer hung in the air, tempting and dangerous. Somewhere else. Anywhere else. Away from the nightmare waiting in that house. But running would only make things worse, and she knew it. Around the block is fine. They drove in silence for a while, the city lights blurring past the tinted windows. It was full dark now, and the streets were coming alive with nightlife, humans and vampires mixing freely in the restaurants and clubs. The uneasy peace that had settled over the world since the great revealing. Zara watched them pass and wondered what her life would have been like if her parents had been better at business, if they hadn't made whatever terrible deals had landed them in debt to a vampire dynasty. She'd be planning a wedding to Gabriel right now, probably arguing over flower arrangements or cake flavors, instead of sitting in a car with a creature who'd lived for centuries and looked at her like he could see straight through to her bones. Tell me about him, Draven said suddenly. Gabriel. Zara glanced over, surprised. Why? Because I can see him in your eyes every time you think about what's coming. Because understanding what you're losing might help me understand who you are. He turned down a tree-lined street, moving slowly. And because I'm curious, indulge me. So she did. She told him about Gabriel Iverson, the boy next door who'd grown into a man she loved. About his easy smile and quick laugh, the way he could make her feel safe just by taking her hand. About their plans, modest ones, human ones, full of hope and ordinary dreams. A small house in the suburbs, children someday, growing old together, simple things that meant everything. He sounds kind, Draven observed when she finished. Decent, the sort of human who makes me think there might be hope for your species after all. He is, he's good, and I love him. And I'm going to lose him because my parents would rather sell me to vampires than declare bankruptcy. The bitterness was back, sharp as knives. Have you ever been in love? The question seemed to catch him off guard. For a long moment he didn't answer, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. Then, once. A very long time ago. It didn't end well. What happened? She was human. I was vampire. The math of our lifespans didn't work out. His voice was carefully neutral. But Zara heard the old pain underneath. I watched her age and die while I remained exactly as I'd always been. After that, I decided love was a luxury I couldn't afford. I'm sorry, don't be. It was 400 years ago. I've mostly forgotten what she looked like. He said it like he was trying to convince himself and failing. The point is, Zara, I understand what you're facing. Not exactly, but well enough. And for what it's worth, I think Lysander is a fool for not seeing what a gift he's being given. Something in his voice made her look at him more closely. In the dim light from the dashboard, his profile was all elegant lines and cold beauty, utterly inhuman and yet somehow achingly familiar, like a dream she'd had once and forgotten upon waking. You don't approve of this marriage. My approval was not requested. They were circling back toward her family's estate now, the familiar gates coming into view. But no, since you ask, I don't approve of treating humans like commodities to be traded. Unfortunately, I am in the minority among my kind. The car pulled to a stop at the curb, and Zara felt her brief reprieve ending. Soon she'd have to go back inside, face her parents and the Silvaris representatives, hear more about the wedding that would bind her to a man, a vampire she'd never even met. The thought made her stomach churn with dread. Thank you, she said quietly. For the bandage and the drive and for listening, you're welcome. Draven turned to face her fully, and the intensity of his gaze pinned her in place. Listen to me carefully, Zara Owens. The next weeks are going to be difficult. Lysander will expect certain things from you: obedience primarily, and a willingness to smile for the cameras when the engagement is announced. You'll be pulled into our world, introduced to vampire society, taught our customs and laws. It will be overwhelming and frightening, and there will be times when you want to run again. I'm getting a pep talk from a vampire? I'm giving you fair warning. His hand moved, almost unconsciously, to brush a strand of hair from her face. His fingers were cool against her cheek, and Zara's breath caught at the gentleness of the gesture. But I'm also telling you that if you need help, if things become truly unbearable, you can call on me. I may not be able to stop this marriage, but I can make certain you're treated with the respect you deserve. Why would you do that? You don't even know me, because someone should. He withdrew his hand, and Zara felt the loss of that touch like a physical thing. Because I'm tired of watching my kind treat humans as lesser beings. And because there's something about you, Zara Owens, that makes me want to ensure you survive what's coming. Before she could respond, he was out of the car and opening her door, offering his hand to help her out with old-world courtesy. Zara took it, letting him steady her as she stepped onto the sidewalk. His grip was gentle but firm, and when she looked up into his eyes, she saw something there that made her heart skip concern. Yes, but also a flicker of something warmer. Something almost like longing. Go on, he said softly. They'll be wondering where you've gone. And Zara, keep that hand clean and dry. Iron wounds can fester if neglected. She nodded, not trusting her voice, and turned toward the house. She made it 3 steps before looking back, but he was already gone, slipped away into the shadows with that unnatural vampire speed. Leaving her alone with her bandaged hand and the memory of his cool fingers against her skin, the next 3 weeks passed in a blur of preparation and dread. Zara was fitted for a wedding dress she didn't want, had her photograph taken with Lysander for the engagement announcement, sat through endless meetings about vampire etiquette and protocol. Lysander himself was exactly as cold as Draven had worn, tall and pale and beautiful in the way all vampires were, but utterly without warmth. He looked at her, like she was a chess piece being moved into position, useful, but ultimately replaceable, and he spoke to her only when necessary, usually to correct some error in her understanding of vampire customs. Gabriel tried to see her twice, but her parents turned him away both times. The 3rd time, he managed to catch her leaving one of her dress fittings, and they stood in the parking lot for 15 agonizing minutes, both of them crying as he begged her to run away with him, and she explained through tears why she couldn't, why her family would be destroyed if she broke this contract, why she had no choice. I love you, he'd said, holding her face in his hands, looking at her like he was trying to memorize every detail. Zara, I love you. That has to count for something. It counts for everything, she'd whispered back. But it's not enough. She'd kissed him goodbye there in the parking lot, tasting salt and sorrow, and then she'd gotten into the car that would take her back to her family estate, and she hadn't seen him since. Through it all, she kept thinking about Draven, about his kind eyes and gentle hands, the way he'd bandaged her palm and driven her around the block until she could breathe again. She'd taken his offer seriously, programmed the number he'd slipped into her pocket that night, into her phone under a false name, but she hadn't called. What would she even say? That she was miserable? He already knew that. That she wanted help? He'd already told her he couldn't stop the marriage, that she couldn't stop thinking about him, about the way he'd looked at her in the darkness of his car, about the phantom sensation of his cool touch against her cheek. That way led nowhere good. She was fitted for her wedding dress on a Tuesday, standing on a raised platform while seamstresses pinned and tucked the layers of white silk and lace. The dress was beautiful, obscenely so. Probably cost more than her parents' house, but wearing it made her feel like she was being measured for a shroud. Her mother stood nearby, offering opinions on the hem length and neckline, acting as if this were a normal wedding, a happy occasion, instead of a transaction that would bind her daughter to the undead. "You'll be the most beautiful bride Vampire Society has ever seen," her mother said with satisfaction as the seamstress marked the final hem. "Lysander is very lucky." Zara said nothing. She'd learned that silence was easier than argument, that her parents had made their peace with selling her, and nothing she said would change their minds. They saw it differently, of course called it an alliance, emphasized the honor of being connected to House Silvaris, reminded her constantly how many human families would kill for this opportunity. The opportunity to marry a vampire who looked at her like she was furniture. That night, alone in her room, she finally broke down and called Draven's number. He answered on the first ring. Zara, just her name, but the warmth in his voice made her throat tight. "Hi, I hope I'm not interrupting anything." "You're not. I was reading. How are you holding up?" "I got fitted for my wedding dress today." She heard her voice crack and hated herself for it. "It's very pretty, very expensive. Very much not what I would have chosen for myself." "What would you have chosen?" The question surprised her. "Something simpler, I think, less formal. Gabriel and I were going to have a small ceremony, just family and close friends. I wanted to wear my grandmother's dress, this vintage thing from the 50s with a tea-length skirt," and she stopped, hearing herself babble. "Sorry, you don't need to hear about this," I asked, "didn't I?" There was a rustling sound, like he was settling into a chair. "Tell me about your grandmother's dress." So she did, and somehow that led to telling him about her grandmother herself, the stories she'd told Zara as a child, the recipes she'd taught her. They talked for over an hour, about everything and nothing, books they'd read, places they'd been, the strange new world where humans and vampires tried to coexist despite centuries of fear and misunderstanding. Draven was easy to talk to, asking questions that made her think, sharing observations that made her laugh despite her misery. It became a pattern. Every few nights, when the weight of her situation became too much to bear alone, she'd call him. And he always answered, always had time for her, always listened like what she had to say actually mattered. They never talked about the wedding directly, never addressed the growing connection between them. But it was there all the same, a lifeline in the dark, keeping her afloat when she wanted to drown. 2 days before the wedding, Lysander took her to the Silvaris estate for a formal introduction to the family. The estate itself was massive, a sprawling Gothic mansion on the edge of the city that looked like it had been transplanted from some European countryside. Inside, it was all dark wood and darker shadows, lit by candles and the occasional electric light, filled with beautiful pale creatures who watched her with ancient, hungry eyes. Lysander's father, Lord Silvaris, head of the house, was a tall, imposing figure with silver-white hair and eyes like chips of ice. He looked Zara over with the same dispassionate assessment his son had shown, then nodded once. "She'll do. See that she's educated properly in our ways before the ceremony. I won't have a Silvaris bride embarrassing us with ignorance." "Yes, father." Lysander's hand on her back was cold even through her dress. "Come, Zara, I'll introduce you to the rest of the family." They moved through the mansion like she was a prize being shown off, Lysander presenting her to aunts and uncles and cousins, whose names she immediately forgot, all of them beautiful and pale and utterly terrifying in their otherness. Some were kind, or at least polite. Others looked at her like she was food. One particularly old vampire, a great aunt of some sort, actually sniffed her and commented on her bloodline, tracing her ancestry through scent alone in a way that made Zara's skin crawl. She endured it because she had no choice, smiled when expected, answered questions about her family and education with the responses Lysander had drilled into her. All the while she searched the crowd for white hair and wine-dark eyes, for the one vampire in this house who'd shown her genuine kindness. She found him finally in the library, a massive room lined floor to ceiling with books, both ancient and modern. Draven stood by one of the tall windows, looking out at the grounds, and he didn't turn when she entered, even though she knew he'd heard her footsteps. "Hiding?" she asked softly. "Avoiding." He glanced over his shoulder, and his expression softened when he saw her. "These family gatherings bore me to tears. How are you managing?" "About as well as you'd expect." She moved to stand beside him, looking out at the formal gardens spread below. "Your family is terrifying." "Yes, they are. It's rather the point." He turned to face her fully, and his eyes traveled over her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You look exhausted, Zara. Are you sleeping?" "Not much." The admission slipped out before she could stop it. "Every time I close my eyes, I see my future stretching out decades, centuries maybe, tied to someone who doesn't even like me, living in a world I don't understand, becoming something I never wanted to be." "You don't have to go through with this," she almost laughed. "Yes, I do. You know I do. My family, your family, made their choice." Draven moved closer, and Zara's heart started to pound. "That doesn't mean you have to live with the consequences of their mistakes. There are other options, Zara, other paths." "Like what? Running away? You said yourself that wouldn't work." Your family would come after me, after Gabriel, if they thought he'd help me. I'm trapped, Draven. This is happening whether I want it or not. Then I'll claim you first. The words hung in the air between them, impossible and electric. Zara stared at him, certain she'd misheard. What? I'll claim you. His hand came up to cup her cheek, the touch gentle and devastating. It's an old law, rarely invoked but still valid. If a vampire of higher rank than the intended groom claims a bride before the wedding ceremony is completed, the marriage contract is void. The bride belongs to the one who claimed her instead. But you're not. Lysander is the heir, and you're the king's brother. His smile was sharp and dangerous. I am what Lysander will never be, no matter how long he lives. I am Draven Silvaris, vampire king of the Eastern Territories, and I outrank my nephew by blood and by crown. If I claim you, Lysander cannot have you. The marriage contract would be transferred to me instead. The world seemed to tilt sideways. You're a king? I prefer not to advertise it. The title came to me 2 centuries ago when I helped broker peace between the vampire territories. I find it useful for political purposes but tiresome in daily life. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone and Zara shivered. But it means I can save you from this marriage, Zara. If you want to be saved. Want. Such a simple word for the tangle of emotions rioting through her. Want to be free of Lysander? Yes, desperately. Want to be claimed by Draven instead? That was more complicated. He was still a vampire, still immortal and dangerous and utterly inhuman. But he was also kind, and he listened to her, and when he touched her, she felt more alive than she had in weeks. I don't understand, she whispered. Why would you do this? What do you get out of it, honestly? I'm not entirely sure. His other hand came up to frame her face, holding her like she was something precious. I told myself I was being altruistic, that I simply wanted to save you from my nephew's cold indifference. But the truth is more selfish than that. The truth is that I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since that first night, when you bled on the steps and cried in my car. The truth is that every time you call me, I find myself hoping you'll never hang up. The truth is that the thought of you married to Lysander, belonging to him, makes me want to set this entire house on fire. Zara's breath came short and sharp. Draven, you would still be married to a vampire, he continued, his voice low and urgent. Still bound to our world, still subject to its laws and customs. I can't give you the simple human life you wanted with Gabriel. But I can promise you respect and protection and time to learn what this new life means without being rushed or frightened into it. And I can promise that I will never treat you as anything less than the remarkable woman you are. This is insane, completely. His smile was crooked, almost boyish, despite the ancient wisdom in his eyes. But then, what about this situation isn't? Your parents sold you to vampires, Zara. At least this way you get to choose which one. She should say no. Should tell him this was impossible, that she couldn't just trade one vampire for another, that she needed to think, to process, to talk to her parents. But then she thought about Lysander's cold eyes and colder hands, about a lifetime of being looked at like property, and she thought about Draven's gentleness and the way he'd bandaged her palm and driven her around the block until she could breathe. If you claim me, she said slowly, what happens then? We marry. Quickly, before Lysander's ceremony can take place. My rank means I can perform the binding myself, a private ceremony, nothing like the spectacle that's being planned. Afterward, you would live with me, learn our ways at your own pace, be introduced to society as my wife rather than Lysander's. He paused. And there are other benefits to being married to a king rather than an heir, if you're interested in practical considerations. More freedom, more protection, more say in your own future. And the marriage itself? Would you expect? She couldn't finish the question, felt her cheeks heat with embarrassment. Understanding flickered in his eyes. I would expect nothing you weren't ready to give. The marriage can be as real or as nominal as you wish it to be, Zara. I won't force myself on you. You have my word on that. Outside the library, she could hear voices approaching, Lysander's cold tones, her mother's bright false cheerfulness. They were looking for her, probably, wondering where the bride-to-be had wandered off to. In moments they would open the library door and find her here with Draven, and her chance to choose would be gone. Tell me yes, Draven said softly, urgently. Tell me you want this. Want me. I know I'm not what you dreamed of, but I can keep you safe, Zara. I can give you a life where you're valued, not traded. Just say yes. She thought of Gabriel, sweet and human and forever lost to her. She thought of her parents who'd sold her future for their own comfort. She thought of Lysander, who looked at her like furniture, and Draven, who looked at her like she mattered. The choice, when it came down to it, was easy. Yes, she whispered. He kissed her then, the first time he'd done more than touch her face, and the sensation stole her breath. His lips were cool but not cold, firm and gentle all at once, and he kissed her like she was something rare and breakable, like he'd been wanting to do this for weeks and was determined to savor every second. Zara's hands came up to grip his shoulders, feeling the solid strength of him beneath the expensive fabric of his shirt, and she kissed him back with all the desperate hope she'd been trying to suppress. When they finally broke apart, both breathing harder than necessary, his eyes had darkened to the color of fresh blood and his fangs had descended slightly. He saw her notice and pulled back with a rueful expression. "Sorry, you affect me more than I expected. Is that bad?" "Not bad. Dangerous, perhaps, but not bad." He took her hand, the one he'd bandaged weeks ago, now healed without even a scar, and pressed a kiss to her palm. "We need to move quickly. I'll arrange the ceremony for tomorrow night before Lysander's wedding can take place. Can you be ready? To marry a vampire king I've known for 3 weeks instead of the vampire heir I've known for 3 days. A slightly hysterical laugh bubbled up in her chest. "I don't think ready is possible, but I'll be there, that's all I ask." He released her hand reluctantly. "Go back to Lysander now, before he comes looking. Smile and nod and play the dutiful bride-to-be. Tomorrow night everything changes." She left the library on shaking legs, her lips still tingling from his kiss, her mind reeling with what she'd just agreed to. In the hallway she nearly collided with Lysander, who looked at her with his usual cold assessment. "There you are. Mother wants to discuss the ceremony details with you." "Of course." Zara fell into step beside him, and if he noticed anything different about her, any flush in her cheeks or brightness in her eyes, he gave no sign. He never looked at her that closely anyway. Tomorrow, she thought. Tomorrow she would belong to Draven instead, would escape this cold future and step into one that terrified her nearly as much but at least held the promise of kindness. Tomorrow her life would change in ways she couldn't even imagine. She just had to survive tonight. The next day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Zara went through the motions of her final preparations, confirmed details with the wedding planner, smiled at her mother's excited chatter about the ceremony. All the while her phone stayed silent, no word from Draven, and she started to wonder if she'd imagined the whole thing. Maybe it had been a dream, a desperate fantasy conjured by her terrified mind. Maybe when night fell nothing would happen and she'd wake up tomorrow to marry Lysander as planned. But as dusk approached, her phone finally buzzed with a text from Draven's number. "Car will pick you up at midnight. Bring nothing. I'll provide everything you need." Relief and terror warred in her chest. This was really happening. She was really doing this. At 11:30, she pleaded a headache and retreated to her room. Her parents barely noticed, too busy with last-minute preparations for tomorrow's ceremony to pay attention to their daughter's state of mind. Zara locked her bedroom door, changed into simple jeans and a sweater, and waited by the window with her heart in her throat. At exactly midnight, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb below. No headlights, nearly invisible in the dark. Zara took a deep breath, opened her window, and climbed out onto the trellis she'd used for secret escapes as a teenager. The climb down was harder than she remembered, but she made it without falling, dropped onto the lawn and ran for the car. The door opened before she reached it and Draven stepped out, dressed all in black, looking like some dark prince from a fairy tale. "Ready?" "No, but let's do this anyway." His smile flashed white in the darkness. "That's my brave girl." They drove through the city to a part of town Zara had never seen, where old money and older magic had carved out a space separate from the modern world. The buildings here looked like they'd been transplanted from medieval Europe, all stone and stained glass, and the streets were lit by actual gaslight rather than electricity. Vampires moved through the shadows, pale and beautiful and terrifying, and a few turned to watch as Draven's car passed. "This is the court quarter," Draven explained as they drove. "The heart of vampire society in this territory. Only those with permission can enter, and anyone who tries to cause trouble here tends to disappear permanently. You'll be safe here, Zara. I promise you that." They pulled up in front of a cathedral-like building, all Gothic arches and flying buttresses that looked like it had been standing for centuries. Draven came around to open her door, offering his hand to help her out, and she took it with fingers that trembled only slightly. Inside, the building was even more impressive, soaring ceilings painted with murals of vampire history, floors of polished marble, air that smelled of incense and old magic. A handful of vampires waited near the altar, witnesses required for the ceremony to be official, and they bowed when Draven entered with Zara on his arm. "My Lord King," one of them said, a woman with silver-white hair and violet eyes. "Everything is prepared as you requested." "Excellent." "Zara, this is Lady Seraphine, my second-in-command and oldest friend." "Seraphine, this is Zara Owens, who has consented to become my wife." Seraphine's gaze was sharp and assessing but not unkind. "Welcome, child. You must be either very brave or very desperate to choose this path." "Both," Zara admitted. "Mostly desperate, if I'm being honest." That earned her a small smile. "Honest, I like that. Very well, let's begin before Lysander realizes what's happening and tries to stop us." The ceremony itself was nothing like the elaborate production that had been planned for tomorrow. No crowds, no cameras, no expensive flowers or orchestral music. Just Draven and Zara standing before the altar while Seraphine and the other witnesses looked on, and Draven speaking the ancient words of the vampire marriage rite in a language Zara didn't recognize but somehow understood anyway. The words spoke of binding in blood, of devotion across centuries, of two souls choosing to walk the dark path together. When Draven finished, he produced a small silver knife and held it out to Zara. "The final step," he said softly. "A blood exchange. You cut your palm, I cut mine, we clasp hands and let our blood mingle. It creates a bond between us, nothing as deep as the full turning, but enough that we'll always be able to sense each other, find each other if we're separated. You don't have to do this if you're not ready. We can seal the marriage with just words, and do the blood bond later if you choose." Zara looked at the knife, then at Draven's face. In the candlelight he looked both beautiful and otherworldly, and she thought about what he was offering her: safety, respect, time to find her footing in this new world. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was so much more than Lysander would have given. And maybe, whispered a small voice in her heart, maybe it could become love given time. "I'll do it." She took the knife and drew the blade across her palm, hissing at the sharp sting. Blood welled up, crimson against her pale skin, and she held her hand out to Draven. He cut his own palm with the same knife, then clasped her bleeding hand in his. Where their blood met, she felt a shock run through her entire body, not painful but intense, like touching a live wire. Draven's eyes flared bright red, and she knew hers must be reflecting the same strange light. "With this blood I bind us," Draven said, his voice resonating with power. "Zara Owens, you are mine now and I am yours. Let no one break what we have forged here tonight." The world seemed to tilt and spin, magic rushing through Zara's veins like wildfire. She gasped, swaying, and Draven caught her with his free arm, holding her steady while the bond settled into place. When her vision cleared, she could feel him, a warm, solid presence at the back of her mind, comforting and strange all at once. "It's done," Seraphine announced with satisfaction. "By the ancient laws and modern codes, you are married. Congratulations, my lord, and welcome to House Silvaris, Zara. Or should I say, welcome to House Draven. I believe you'll be starting your own line now. We'll discuss politics later." Draven was still holding Zara, looking down at her with concern. "How do you feel?" "Weird," she managed. "But okay. Is it always like that?" "The first time, yes. It will settle." He released her carefully, watching to make sure she was steady. "Come. We should leave before word of this reaches Lysander. I have a safe place prepared for us." They left the cathedral quickly, Draven's hand warm and solid in hers, and drove through the winding streets of the court quarter to a building that looked like a converted church. Inside, it had been transformed into a stunning living space, all high ceilings and open floor plans, furnished with a mix of antique and modern pieces that somehow worked together. "This is your home?" Zara asked, looking around in wonder. "Our home now." Draven closed the door behind them and engaged several locks, including what looked like magical wards that glowed faintly before fading from sight. "You'll be safe here. The building is warded against intrusion, and only those I've keyed into the protections can enter. Lysander can rage all he wants, he can't touch you here." Rage, right. Lysander was going to be furious when he found out. "What will happen tomorrow, when I don't show up for the wedding?" "I imagine there will be shouting, accusations. Probably threats of legal action, though they won't stick. I invoked my rights properly with witnesses, and the marriage is legally binding under both vampire and human law." Draven shrugged, unconcerned. "My brother will be angry with me for disrupting his heir's plans, but he'll accept it eventually. He has no choice. I outrank him in this territory." "And my parents?" His expression softened. "I've arranged for their debts to be cleared. They won't face any consequences beyond embarrassment. That was part of my condition for claiming you, your family's safety guaranteed." Tears pricked Zara's eyes. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did. You wouldn't have been able to enjoy any peace if you were worrying about them." He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture now familiar and comforting. "You're my wife now, Zara. Your happiness is my responsibility." Wife. The word still felt surreal. "I don't know how to be a vampire's wife." "Then it's fortunate you married one who's willing to teach you." His smile was warm, genuine. "Come, let me show you your room. You must be exhausted." He led her upstairs to a bedroom that was larger than her entire apartment back home, decorated in soft grays and deep blues, with a bed that looked like it could sleep 6 people comfortably. There was an ensuite bathroom, a walk-in closet already filled with clothes in her size, and a reading nook by the window with shelves full of books. "How did you all of this in one day?" "I'm very efficient when motivated." Draven leaned against the doorframe, watching as she explored the space. "And I've been planning this for longer than you might think. Since that first night, if I'm being honest. I kept telling myself I was just preparing contingency plans, but I think I knew even then that I wasn't going to let Lysander have you." Zara turned to face him, studying his expression. "Why me? You must have met thousands of humans over the centuries. What makes me special?" "I don't know," he admitted. "There's something about you, your strength perhaps, or your refusal to simply accept your fate without questioning it." The way you cried in my car but still went back into that house to face what was coming. The way you've handled all of this with grace even when you were terrified." He paused. "Or maybe it's simpler than that. Maybe I just looked at you and saw someone worth saving. Worth keeping. I'm not going to fall in love with you overnight," she warned. "I know this marriage is real now, legal, but my heart still belongs to Gabriel. That doesn't just go away." "I know. I'm not asking for your heart yet, Zara. Just your trust. The rest will come or it won't, and we'll deal with it either way." He straightened. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will be difficult when everyone realizes what's happened. You'll need your strength." He turned to leave, but Zara's voice stopped him. "Draven, thank you for all of this, for giving me a choice when I thought I had none. You're welcome." His smile was soft, almost vulnerable. "Good night, Zara. Sleep well." She did, surprisingly. Despite everything, the rushed marriage, the blood bond, the strange new home, she fell asleep almost as soon as her head hit the pillow and didn't wake until well past noon the next day. When she finally emerged from her room, dressed in jeans and a t-shirt from the mysteriously well-stocked closet, she found Draven in the kitchen reading a tablet and drinking something dark red from a wine glass. He looked up when she entered, and his expression brightened. "Good afternoon. Coffee? I had some brought in for you." "Please." She accepted the mug he poured, added cream and sugar, and took a grateful sip. "What time was I supposed to marry Lysander?" 3 hours ago." He gestured to the tablet. "The news broke about an hour ago. We're the scandal of the season." Zara came around to look at the screen. Headlines scrolled past, each more dramatic than the last. "Vampire King claims Nepal's bride." "Silvaris family in turmoil. Prince Lysander humiliated his uncle, steals Fenche." And from one particularly breathless gossip site, "Love match or power play? Draven Silvaris marries human in midnight ceremony." "Oh God," Zara breathed. "My parents must be losing their minds. Your mother has called 17 times. I've been ignoring it." Draven set down the tablet and studied her face. "Do you want to talk to them?" Did she? They'd sold her to vampires without a second thought, but they were still her parents. Maybe later. "What about Lysander?" "Furious, as expected. He's been making noise about contesting the claim, but my legal team has already shut that down. The marriage is valid, the blood bond is witnessed and registered, and there's nothing he can do about it." Draven's smile was sharp. "He's not accustomed to losing. It will be good for his character." Before Zara could respond, the wards on the apartment flared bright enough to see even in daylight, and someone began pounding on the door with enough force to rattle the frame. "That would be Lysander now," Draven observed calmly. "Or possibly my brother. Either way, this should be entertaining." He stood and headed for the door, and after a moment's hesitation, Zara followed. Draven opened the door to reveal Lysander, looking more animated than Zara had ever seen him, his face twisted with rage. Behind him stood Lord Silvaris, looking cold and dangerous, and a handful of vampire guards. "You bastard," Lysander snarled, and Zara had never heard such venom in anyone's voice. "You absolute bastard. She was mine. The contract is void." Draven's voice was utterly calm, utterly unmoved. "I invoked my right of claim. Everything was done properly, with witnesses and documentation. Zara is my wife now, not your bride-to-be." "This is unacceptable!" Lysander tried to push past Draven into the apartment, but stopped short when he hit the wards. They flared again, repelling him, and he stumbled backward with a hiss. "You can't just steal your what?" Draven's voice dropped to something dangerous. "Your property, your possession? That's how you thought of her, wasn't it? A useful acquisition, a means to an alliance. Well, nephew, let me make something very clear. Zara is a person, not a chess piece. And she deserves better than to be married to someone who sees her as a transaction. And you're so much better?" Lysander's laugh was bitter. "Please. You took her to spite me, nothing more. Don't pretend this is about her well-being. You're wrong." Draven's hand found Zara's, his fingers lacing through hers. "But I don't particularly care if you believe me. The marriage is legal and binding. Accept it and move on." Lord Silvaris finally spoke, his voice like ice cracking. "You've caused a considerable problem, brother. The Owens family debts were to be satisfied through Lysander's marriage. Now that marriage won't happen. The debts remain." "No, they don't." Draven pulled out his phone and brought up a document. "I paid them in full this morning. The Owens family owes House Silvaris nothing. The slate is clean." "You what?" Lysander looked like he might actually combust. "You paid their debts? Do you have any idea how much?" "Quite a bit, yes. Worth every penny." Draven's smile was cold and satisfied. "Face it, Lysander, you've lost. Go home, lick your wounds, and find another way to secure your alliance with the human elite. This one is mine." For a moment, Zara thought Lysander might actually attack. His fangs were fully descended, his eyes glowing red, his entire body vibrating with fury. But Lord Silvaris put a hand on his son's shoulder, restraining him. "We will discuss this later," Lord Silvaris said to Draven, his voice promising retribution. "Come, Lysander, there's nothing more to be done here." They left, Lysander shooting one last venomous look at Zara before the elevator doors closed, As soon as they were gone, Zara's knees went weak and she sagged against Draven. That was terrifying, she breathed. That was necessary. He caught her, steadying her, his arms coming around her in a protective embrace. He needed to understand that you're not available, not his, not ever going to be, and now he does. Zara let herself lean into his strength for a moment, feeling the solid reality of him, the truth of what they'd done. She was married to a vampire king, bound to him by blood and law. It should have felt like another trap, another cage, but instead it felt like freedom, like she'd finally taken control of her own life. Over the next weeks, Zara began to learn what being married to Draven actually meant. He was patient with her, never pushing, always giving her space to adjust to her new reality. He taught her about vampire society, the complex hierarchy, the ancient laws, the careful dance of politics that governed interactions between the undead. He introduced her to his world gradually, bringing trusted friends to the apartment first before taking her out to social events. Seraphine became an unexpected ally, the ancient vampire taking Zara under her wing and teaching her the subtleties of vampire etiquette that Draven sometimes forgot to mention. He's been king for so long he forgets what it's like to be new to all this, Seraphine explained one afternoon while helping Zara prepare for her first formal dinner. But you're doing well, child. Better than most humans would in your position. I don't have much choice but to do well, Zara replied, struggling with the clasp on her necklace. It's not like I can go back to my old life, can't you? Seraphine took the necklace and fastened it with practiced ease. Draven would release you from the marriage if you truly wanted to leave. You know that, don't you? Zara hadn't known that. She turned to face Seraphine, startled. He would? He's not a monster, despite what some might think. If you came to him tomorrow and said you wanted out, wanted to return to your human life and your human love, he would let you go. It would cost him politically, and personally I think it would break his heart, but he would do it. Seraphine's violet eyes were knowing. But you're not going to ask for that, are you? No, Zara admitted. I'm not. Because somewhere between that first night when he'd bandaged her hand and now standing in his apartment preparing to attend a dinner as his wife, things had shifted. She'd started to see Draven not as an escape from Lysander, but as someone valuable in his own right. Someone kind and thoughtful who remembered that she liked her coffee with 2 sugars and cream, who left books he thought she'd enjoy on her nightstand, who asked about her day and actually listened to the answers. Someone who looked at her like she mattered. And more than that, someone who made her feel things she'd thought died when she lost Gabriel. Warmth when he smiled, safety when he touched her, possibility when he talked about their future together. It wasn't love, not yet. But it might be becoming something close. The formal dinner was intimidating, a gathering of vampire nobility in a mansion even grander than the Silvaris estate. All of them dressed in expensive designer clothes and dripping with jewelry that probably cost more than Zara's parents' house. She stuck close to Draven's side, grateful for his steady presence and the way he kept one hand at the small of her back, a constant reminder that she wasn't alone in this. Lysander was there, of course, with a new human woman on his arm, a blonde socialite who smiled too brightly and laughed too loudly at everything he said. Clearly his replacement bride, though Draven said nothing when they were introduced, just nodded politely and moved on, his hand never leaving Zara's back. But halfway through dinner, Lysander cornered Zara in the hallway when she'd excused herself to find the restroom. You must be very pleased with yourself, he said, his voice dripping with contempt. Seducing my uncle, stealing what was rightfully mine. Zara lifted her chin, refusing to be intimidated. I didn't seduce anyone and I was never yours, Lysander. The contract your family made was with my parents, not with me. Semantics. He moved closer, backing her against the wall. You're playing a dangerous game, little human. Draven may be king, but he's not invincible. And I have a very long memory. Is that a threat? Draven's voice came from behind Lysander, cold and deadly. Because threatening my wife would be a very poor decision, nephew. Lysander spun around, and for a moment the 2 vampires faced each other, tension crackling in the air between them. Then Lysander stepped back, his hands raised in mock surrender. No threat, just a friendly warning. Your new bride should be careful. She's made enemies tonight simply by existing. Then those enemies will have to go through me to reach her. Draven moved to Zara's side, his arm sliding around her waist in a possessive gesture that was pure theater but still made her feel safe. And I promise you, Lysander, that would be the last mistake they ever made. They stared at each other for another long moment before Lysander finally turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing in the marble hallway. As soon as he was gone, Draven turned to Zara with concern. Are you all right? Did he hurt you? No, just tried to scare me. She was shaking slightly, the adrenaline catching up with her. Is he right? Have I made enemies just by marrying you? Probably. Draven cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle. Vampire politics are complicated, and our marriage disrupted several carefully laid plans. But you're also gained allies, Zara. People who respect the courage it took to choose your own path. And you have me, which counts for a great deal in this world. Lucky me, she said, trying for lightness despite her racing heart. I'm the lucky one. His thumb brushed across her cheek, and his eyes were warm with something that might have been affection, might have been more. Come, let's get through the rest of this dinner, and then I'm taking you home. Funny how his apartment had become that in such a short time. A place of safety and comfort in a world that still felt alien and dangerous. That night, after they'd returned and she'd changed into comfortable pajamas, Zara found herself knocking on Draven's bedroom door. He opened it immediately, dressed in sleep pants and nothing else, his white hair loose around his shoulders, and his expression shifted to concern when he saw her. What's wrong? Nothing, She hesitated, feeling foolish. Can I sleep in here tonight? Not for anything sexual. Just I feel safer when you're close. The blood bond, probably, making her seek his presence when she was upset or frightened. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe she just didn't want to be alone. Of course. He stepped back, gesturing her inside. His room was similar to hers, but more personal, books stacked on the nightstands, papers scattered across the desk, a sense that this was a space actually lived in rather than just decorated. Take whichever side you prefer. Zara climbed into the massive bed, feeling the mattress dip as Draven joined her on the other side. For a few minutes they lay there in silence, carefully maintaining space between them, and then Draven spoke softly. I meant what I said earlier. You're safe with me, Zara. Whatever else this marriage is or becomes, you're safe. I promise you that. I know. And she did. Whatever else she might be uncertain about, she trusted that. Trusted him. Draven, can I ask you something? Anything. Do you ever regret this? Taking me from Lysander, disrupting your family's plans, all of it? No. His answer was immediate and firm. Not for a single moment. Even though I can't, even though I don't love you? Not yet, maybe not ever? There was a longer pause this time, then. I won't lie and say that doesn't matter to me. But I married you knowing your heart belonged to someone else, knowing it might always belong to him. I made that choice with my eyes open. He turned to face her, and in the dim light his eyes gleamed red. And if I'm being entirely honest, I think I'm already halfway in love with you anyway. So perhaps it's only fair that I have to work for it, have to earn what you gave Gabriel freely. Zara's breath caught. Draven, you don't have to say anything. I'm not asking for promises or declarations, I just wanted you to know where I stand. His hand found hers beneath the covers, lacing their fingers together. Sleep, Zara. We're safe here. I've got you. She fell asleep holding his hand, and in the morning when she woke, she was curled against his side with her head on his chest and his arm around her shoulders. He was already awake. Vampires didn't need as much sleep as humans, and he was reading on his phone, but he looked down when she stirred and smiled at her with such warmth that her heart skipped. Good morning. She should probably move, put some distance between them, but she was comfortable and he was warm despite being technically undead, and she found she didn't want to. Did you sleep? A few hours. I was mostly watching you and reading reports. His hand came up to stroke her hair, the gesture unconscious and tender. You talk in your sleep sometimes. Did you know that? What did I say? Nothing coherent. Just sounds mostly. Once you said my name. His smile turned almost shy. I liked that. Over the following months they fell into a rhythm. Draven taught her about his world, and she brought lightness and warmth into his long existence. They had breakfast together every morning, dinner together most evenings. They talked about everything: books, politics, history, the strange new world where vampire and human tried to coexist. He introduced her to his work as king, bringing her to meetings and councils, teaching her the intricacies of vampire law and governance, and slowly, carefully, they grew closer. It started with holding hands, then evolved to casual touches, his arm around her shoulders at social events, her head on his shoulder while they watched movies. The first time she kissed him, really kissed him, not the chaste pecks that had marked their early days, was on a rainy Tuesday evening 3 months into their marriage. They'd been curled up on the couch together, arguing good-naturedly about whether a particular book's ending was brilliant or terrible, and she'd looked at him mid-sentence and suddenly wanted nothing more than to kiss that argumentative mouth. So she did. He'd frozen for a moment in surprise before kissing her back with a hunger that stole her breath, his hands coming up to frame her face like she was something precious. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his fangs had descended and his eyes glowed crimson. What was that for? He asked, his voice rough. Because I wanted to. She traced her thumb along his lower lip, careful of the sharp fang. Is that okay? He laughed, the sound breathless and wondering. Zara, you can kiss me whenever you like. I'm not going to complain. They'd spent the rest of that evening on the couch, kissing like teenagers, exploring this new dimension of their relationship with careful hands and breathless laughter. And when they finally retreated to their separate rooms, because Zara still wasn't ready for more, and Draven respected that she lay in bed smiling at the ceiling, Feeling more alive than she had in months, 4 months into their marriage, Gabriel called her. She almost didn't answer, seeing his name on her phone screen after all this time. But curiosity and old affection won out, and she accepted the call with a trembling hand. Zara. His voice was exactly as she remembered, warm and familiar. Hi, I wasn't sure you'd pick up. Hi, Gabriel. She moved to the window, looking out at the court quarters spread below. How did you get this number? Your mom. I had to do some serious begging, but she finally caved. He paused. I heard you got married. To the Vampire King. Yeah, it's been complicated. Are you okay? Happy? Safe? The questions tumbled out rapid fire, laced with concern. Your parents won't tell me anything, and the news reports are all speculation and gossip. I just need to know you're all right. Tears pricked her eyes at the genuine care in his voice. This was the Gabriel she'd loved. Kind and protective and worried about her well-being. I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. Draven, my husband, he's good to me. Really good. Do you love him? The question hung in the air between them. Zara thought about Draven, about the way he made her laugh and challenged her mind and held her when she was scared. About the gentle way he touched her and the fierce way he protected her. About mornings spent drinking coffee together and evenings spent debating literature and long nights spent talking about everything and nothing. I think I might, she admitted softly. I didn't expect to. I thought I'd always love you, only you. But Draven, he's become important to me. Essential, maybe. And I think what I feel for him might be turning into love if it's not already there. Gabriel was quiet for a long moment. Then, I'm glad that you're happy, I mean. I hate how this all happened, hate that we didn't get our chance. But I'm glad you found someone who treats you right, Gabriel. I still love you, he interrupted. I probably always will. But I can hear it in your voice, Zara. You've moved on, you're building a life without me, and as much as it hurts, I'm genuinely happy for you. They talked for a while longer, cautiously catching up on each other's lives, carefully avoiding the painful what-ifs and might-have-beens. When they finally said goodbye, Zara felt like she was closing a chapter of her life. It hurt, but it also felt right. Necessary. She found Draven in his study, working through a stack of documents. And when he looked up and saw her tear-stained face, he was around the desk in an instant. What happened? Are you hurt? No, I might talk to Gabriel. She let him pull her into his arms, burying her face in his chest. We said goodbye, really goodbye this time. It felt like closing a door. I'm sorry. His hand stroked her hair, soothing. I know you loved him. I did. I do. In a way. But not the way She pulled back to look at him, this beautiful ancient creature who'd saved her and cared for her and somehow become the center of her world. Not the way I love you. Draven went very still. What? I love you. The words felt right, true, like something she'd been holding back for weeks without realizing it. I love you, Draven. Not because you're my husband or because of the blood bond or because you saved me from Lysander. I love you because you're you, because you're kind and patient and you make me laugh. Because you look at me like I'm the most important person in your world, because I can't imagine my life without you in it anymore. For a moment he just stared at her, his eyes wide and wondering. Then he kissed her with a desperation that spoke of months of restrained feeling finally breaking free. His hands were in her hair, her back, pulling her closer, and she kissed him back with equal fervor, pouring everything she felt into it. I love you, he said against her lips, the words fierce and reverent. God, Zara, I love you so much. I've been trying not to push, trying to give you time, but I've been in love with you since that first night when you bled on the steps and looked at me like I might save you. You did save me. She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes, in every way that matters. That night she didn't retreat to her own room. She stayed in his, and they explored this new chapter of their relationship with careful hands and whispered endearments, learning each other's bodies the way they'd already learned each other's hearts. Draven was gentle and patient, mindful of her inexperience. And when he finally bit her just a small bite at her throat, taking barely a mouthful of blood, the pleasure that shot through her was so intense she cried out his name. Afterward they lay tangled together in his bed and Zara traced patterns on his pale chest while he played with her hair. No regrets? He asked softly. Not a single one. She pressed a kiss over his heart. Though I suppose this means I should probably move my stuff into this room permanently. I'd like that. His arms tightened around her. I'd like waking up with you every morning. Coming home to you every evening, building a real life together, not just a political alliance or an escape from a bad situation. We are building a real life. She propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. I know I'm still human, and you're immortal, and eventually I'll age and die while you stay exactly as you are. But I want to spend whatever time I have with you, Draven, all of it. If you'll have me, I'll have you for as long as you'll stay. His hand cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing across her lips. And when the time comes, if you want it, I can turn you. Make you vampire, give you eternity with me. But that's your choice, Zara. I'll never force it on you. Eternity. The thought was both terrifying and tempting. But that was a decision for another day, another time. For now, she was content to be human, to be his, to build their life one day at a time. 6 months after their midnight wedding, Draven took her to a private beach house he owned on the coast. It was her first real vacation since the marriage, and she'd been looking forward to it for weeks, a chance to get away from vampire politics and family drama, to just be Zara and Draven without the weight of their titles. They arrived at sunset, and Draven showed her around the house, a sleek modern structure built right on the sand. All glass walls and open spaces designed to maximize the ocean view. It was beautiful and private, and as soon as Zara saw the bedroom with its enormous windows overlooking the water, she started pulling Draven toward it with clear intent. Eager, he teased, but he followed willingly, his hands already working at the buttons of her dress. "We have a whole week with no interruptions," she said, pushing his jacket off his shoulders. "I plan to make the most of it." They did. They spent days walking on the beach, nights making love with the sound of waves crashing in the background. Mornings tangled together watching the sunrise. Draven had to stay out of direct sunlight, but the early morning rays filtered through special UV blocking glass were safe enough. They talked about everything, planned their future, debated silly things and serious ones. On their last night at the beach, Draven surprised her with a small black box. "I know we're already married," he said, opening it to reveal a ring, a band of white gold set with diamonds and a deep red stone that glowed like captured blood. "But we never did the traditional engagement, never had the romance of a proposal, so I wanted to give you this. A symbol of what we've become to each other." Zara's eyes filled with tears as he slid the ring onto her finger beside her simple wedding band. "It's a blood ruby," he explained. "Extremely rare, found only in the deepest vampire minds. It's said to glow brighter when worn by someone truly loved." He kissed her knuckles. "It's blazing on your hand, Zara, like a star." She kissed him then, pouring everything she felt into it, gratitude and love and joy and hope for all the years to come. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she smiled against his lips. "So this is our happy ending?" she asked. "Former sacrifice to the vampire heir, now happily married to the vampire king? I prefer to think of it as our happy beginning." His arms tightened around her. "We have decades ahead of us, Zara, maybe centuries if you choose to turn. Either way, I plan to spend every moment showing you that marrying me was the best decision you ever made. Even better than running from Lysander's wedding. Especially better than that," he grinned. "Though I do appreciate that you gave me the chance to sweep in and claim you. Very dramatic, very romantic." She laughed, the sound bright and free. "You're ridiculous. I'm yours." He said it simply, like a vow. "For as long as you'll have me, I'm yours. Then I guess you're stuck with me forever." She kissed him again, softer this time. "Because I'm not letting you go, Draven Silvaris. You saved me, you married me, you made me fall in love with you. You're mine now, gladly." His smile was radiant, full of love and promise. "Always and forever, my Zara. Always and forever." 2 years later, Zara made her choice. She'd thought long and hard about it, discussed it endlessly with Draven, consulted with Seraphine about what the turning process would entail. In the end, the decision came down to something simple. She wanted more time, more years, more decades, more centuries with the man she loved. The life she'd built with Draven was better than anything she could have imagined, and she wanted to keep living it for as long as possible. The turning was painful but bearable, and Draven stayed with her through every moment of it, holding her hand and whispering encouragement while her body died and was reborn into something new. When she finally opened her eyes with vampire sight, seeing the world in sharper detail and richer color than ever before, the first thing she saw was his face. "Hello, my love," he said softly. "Welcome to eternity." She kissed him, reveling in her new strength, the way she could now match his inhuman speed and power. "Best decision I ever made. Even better than marrying me in that midnight ceremony? Even better than that," she grinned, her new fangs sharp against her lip. "Though that's a close second. They had centuries ahead of them now. Time to build their kingdom, to change vampire society from within, to make it a place where humans and vampires could truly coexist as equals. Time to love each other through countless sunrises and moonrises, to grow and change and build a life that was richer than either of them had dreamed." Zara had been forced to marry the heir, had wept at her fate, had run from a future she couldn't accept. But in running she'd found something better, a vampire king who claimed her first, who loved her fiercely, who gave her the freedom to choose her own path, and she'd chosen him. Would choose him again, in every lifetime, in every possible world. It wasn't the ending she'd planned for herself all those years ago, but it was the ending she'd earned, the one she'd fought for, the one she'd built with her own 2 hands. And it was perfect, years stretched into decades, and their love only deepened. Zara became a force in vampire politics in her own right, using her unique perspective as a former human to bridge the gap between the species. She and Draven ruled their territory with wisdom and compassion, becoming known throughout the vampire world as the king and queen who actually cared about their subjects, human and vampire alike. Lysander eventually apologized, though it took him nearly a decade to swallow his pride enough to do it. He'd married his blonde socialite and seemed reasonably content, though he never achieved the warmth and genuine partnership that Zara and Draven shared. They maintained cordial relations for the sake of family peace, but Zara never forgot how close she'd come to a life bound to him instead. Her parents struggled with her transformation at first, mourning the human daughter they'd lost even as they were forced to accept the powerful vampire she'd become. But over time they reconciled, and Zara made sure they were well cared for through their remaining years. When they passed her father first, then her mother 5 years later, she mourned them, as only someone with eternity stretching ahead could mourn, grieving the finite lives humans lived while cherishing the memories they'd left behind. Gabriel moved on too, eventually marrying a kind woman and having 3 children. Zara saw him once more, at a charity event she and Draven hosted, and they spoke briefly. It was cordial, even warm, but the passionate love they'd once shared had faded to fond memory. He seemed happy, and that was enough through it all. Draven remained her constant, her partner, her lover, her best friend. They fought sometimes passionate arguments that ended in either equally passionate reconciliation or days of cold silence before one of them finally apologized. But they never stopped loving each other, never stopped choosing each other, never let the weight of immortality make them take what they had for granted. On their 50th wedding anniversary, Draven took her back to the place where it all began, the steps of her family's old estate, long since sold and converted into a museum. They stood there in the darkness, her hand in his, and looked at the spot where she'd once bled and cried and contemplated running. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked softly. "The life you might have had if things had been different?" Zara thought about it honestly, considering the question with the weight of 50 years of marriage behind her. She thought about the human life she'd planned with Gabriel, the ordinary dreams she'd harbored. She thought about aging and dying, about having children and grandchildren, about all the simple human joys she'd given up when she became vampire. Then she looked at Draven, her husband, her king, her heart, and she smiled. "Not for a single moment," she said. "Not for a single second. This life with you, it's better than anything I could have dreamed. You saved me, Draven, in every way a person can be saved." He pulled her close, kissing her with 50 years of love and devotion behind it. "You saved me too," he whispered against her lips. "I was existing, not living, going through the motions of eternity without any real joy in it. And then you bled on these steps, and you cried in my car, and you looked at me like I might be worth believing in. You gave my life meaning again, Zara, purpose beyond politics and power." They stood there for a long time, holding each other in the place where their story began, and Zara thought about fate and choice, about doors closing and others opening, about how the worst moment of her life had led her to the best decision she'd ever made. She'd been forced to marry the heir instead of the man she loved. She'd wept until the vampire king claimed her first, sweeping her away into a midnight ceremony and a life she'd never imagined. And she'd fallen in love with him, chosen him, bound herself to him for eternity. It was a story that shouldn't have worked, a romance born from desperation and political maneuvering and ancient vampire law. But it did work against all odds, and it became the foundation for a love that would last centuries. The forced marriage became a chosen one. The weeping bride became a fierce queen. The vampire king who claimed her became the love of her immortal life, and they lived, truly lived, happily ever after, together for all eternity, exactly as they were meant to be.